walking on the road outside the house to get a clear view of the ocean. A bit windy this morning. Hopefully the sound is not too bad. But that's what it looks like a little farther down the road. Not sure about that house on the corner, whether anybody lives there. There's the house that I'm staying in. The road leading to it. And then the ocean over here. You can see some other land in the distance. That's what it looks like out on the road. The ferry to Saint Pierre was leaving the next day, so I had one full day to explore this end of the Burin Peninsula. I decided to head back to Marystown. Once I was there, I was going to walk around for a little bit, also plug it back into the charger to take it all the way to 100%. So I headed back there to do that. So I've come back to the Marystown DC fast charger, and it's actually the first time that another electric car has also pulled up and is plugged in. Fortunately, they're using the slower charger, so I can use the fast charger, which I'm plugged into now. I can let that charge while I'm walking around Marystown. My first stop is going to be the Marystown Model Ship Museum, which was recommended by the owners of the house that I'm staying at. So that's about a 3-minute walk. I'm going to head over there, check it out, and go from there. So I went into the gallery and, to be honest, spent more time in there than I intended to. The 2 volunteers that were working that day and each individually walked me around, showed me some of the individual ships that had been constructed, told me little stories about the real ships in real life, and encouraged me to walk around and take pictures. It wasn't just something they did with me. Basically, anyone that came in, they kind of took them aside and said, hey, you should know about this, you should know about this. So it made for a very interesting and informative experience. From there, I headed back the way I came, past Grand Beach, farther on to a different place called Grand Bank. This had a couple of places to eat, recommended by the owners of the house, also the Provincial Seamen's Museum, so I headed that way. The Provincial Seamen's Museum has a very distinctive shape meant to represent sails of sailing ships. So when you see it in person, it's pretty easy to understand which is the museum. So had no trouble finding it and went in to spend some time. I ended up walking around the museum for quite a while. I was fascinated by the exhibits, both actual tools, actual boats, and some models. So you got a real sense of the workings of the fisherman industry in Newfoundland, which you do notice commercially these days whenever you're around the coast and you see the actual boats, people working on the boats. For somebody that lives most of my life in landlocked situations, I just don't have any experience with seeing these things in person. So it was quite interesting for me to walk around, look at everything, look at all the notes as to what everything was, and take it in. And it was very quiet the day that I was there. It really had just opened up in May A lot of the museums and exhibits that you find around this part of Newfoundland are only open during the warmer months, so fortunately I was able to catch this one. Some other ones that I was interested in I was not able to go to because they weren't open yet, including one place in Grand Bank that I did want to go to. So you do have to check ahead to make sure that the place that you want to see is available and open. But once you do find that, then such as this place, it's quite interesting. The next day was the day to leave on the ferry to Saint Pierre. That night had been very windy with a little bit of rain, so wasn't as peaceful of a night sleep as it was the night before. Nevertheless, I was able to get packed fairly early and head on into Fortune. One nice thing about Fortune is a lot of the things that you would need as a tourist are clustered right near the harbor and right near the ferry terminal. I found a close-by restaurant called the Harbor Diner attached to a convenience store and sat down for a few minutes, had a nice meal, and then decided to tour some sites to see more of Fortune before getting into the ferry terminal. A little ways out of town is the Fortune Lighthouse. In the description I saw online, it did say that it was a little bit of a trip down a dirt road, which I didn't mind that so much. I've been on dirt roads with my vehicle, and I had some time to kill, so I did make the trip out to the lighthouse. The weather had improved quite a bit, which was also another reason why I went. It was quite windy when I got out there, but again, spectacular views of the ocean, and come to find out that the boat goes right by here on the way to Saint Pierre. Now, I had booked my passage via SPM ferries. I had done that really at the start of my trip. I booked the ferry passage and then figured out my hotels from there. One of the things I noticed right off the bat is it was going to be difficult to take my vehicle for two reasons. One, it can't have any soil or vegetation on it. They'll clean the car for you if necessary and charge you for it. But the more important issue was insurance, because normal North American car insurance will not cover taking a car to France, which is where you're going. So basically, you have to buy special insurance, which for such a short trip, I didn't want to do. Plus, I was only going to be spending one night, so the cost to get the insurance just didn't seem worth it. My ferry ride over was supposed to leave a little after 7 p.m. One thing to note is that the time in Saint Pierre is a half hour ahead of Newfoundland, which is itself a half hour ahead of Nova Scotia, which is in the Atlantic time zone, which is 1 hour ahead of the Eastern time zone. So by the time I got to Saint Pierre, I was a full 2 hours ahead of where I had originally left from. There are 2 decks on the ferry which are suitable for passengers. I don't believe there are any cabins on this particular ferry, so I looked at the first floor and then went up to the next floor. This seemed to have a better view of the travel, so I decided to take a seat here. Here is a look at the safety card for the ferry so you can get a better sense of the layout of the decks. We actually left a few minutes earlier than scheduled. I think once every ticketed passenger was on, it was time to go. So an hour and a half after, about 7:15 when we left, plus add the half-hour time difference, we were going to get into Saint Pierre about 9:15. I kept track of our progress by looking on Google Maps. As long as we had cell service, I was able to do that. So it was interesting heading down the coast that I had just been on. We did end up going by the lighthouse, the Fortune Lighthouse that I had just been to earlier that day. It was very interesting seeing that now from the ocean side, having been up by where those flagpoles are. Now I get to see it from the ocean. The trip itself was very uneventful. The weather had calmed down quite a bit compared to earlier in the day, so it was just a matter of getting there. I was a little concerned about the time we were arriving because even though there would still be a little daylight left, I'd have to walk to the hotel and then check in. In my previous emails with the hotel, it had been in French, so it was difficult for me to communicate other than by email. So they had asked me a day or two before the trip whether or not I needed a shuttle, and I said no because it was about a 13-minute walk. I didn't think that was an issue. Now I was starting to wonder if that was a good decision to tell them that, because even though I had a reservation and that I actually paid in advance for the hotel room, I wasn't 100% sure if I would have anybody there to meet me when I arrived. Now, this is when the fun would begin, because when I had gotten out of the terminal ready to walk to the hotel, I had gone to Google Maps on my phone, and this is the image that I had. So I was going to walk in the intended direction about 12 minutes and look for the hotel. Unfortunately, I had found the wrong hotel in the app, because there are 2 hotels on the northern part of the town that start with the same word, auberge, but are 1 block away from each other. And in fact, the hotel that I had booked at was 1 block farther than the first hotel, the one that was on Google Maps. As it happens, auberge in French means hotel, so that's why both hotels had the same first word. So I went into the wrong hotel, the Saint Pierre, and when I contacted the manager by their landline phone in the lobby, he said, "You're at the wrong place. You need to go one block over." And you probably got confused because auberge means hotel, and we both have the same first word. I'm sure it's something that's happened before, so I apologize profusely and then headed to the correct hotel. So this is the hotel room in Saint Pierre. I'll talk a little bit more about my experience getting into the hotel, but it's very nice and clean. Got in kind of late, so I wasn't able to necessarily document my way to the hotel. I'll talk about that a little more at another time. But I successfully made it into the hotel room, and this is the bathroom. This is the shower. There's no separate light in there, so it's a little dark, but otherwise it looks nice. Cozy, I guess, is the word for the price. This is what I'm getting. It's a pretty good value, but it's probably the most expensive per night hotel that I've stayed at on this trip. So I'll update this in the morning and as part of the video going forward as to how I got in here, because it was a little bit of a story. But for now, I'm going to relax. Unfortunately, when I went to the right place, when I arrived, the lobby was dark and no one was around. So I panicked a little bit and tried to send a couple of texts. They wouldn't go through. Spectrum cell phone said, "Go find a free Wi-Fi location to be able to send a text." Fortunately, while I was standing in the courtyard with my bag, the manager, Pascal, came out and rescued me. And probably because they were expecting me, they were probably looking for me. So fortunately, they were able to come out and find me and get me into my hotel room. The next morning was a Sunday morning. I had gotten up early because the ferry was going to leave about 1 o'clock. So I wanted to walk around while I had a little bit of time. You'll see in the videos how peaceful and quiet it was. There were almost no cars. I only saw a couple of people out in the streets, a couple of joggers. So I pretty much had the entire main part of Saint Pierre to myself walking around. So I got quite a few videos walking down the streets, walking to the harbor, and basically had my fill of where to go. As I walked around, I noticed this Peugeot and also a Dacia, which are brands that are not sold in Canada or the US, and I was wondering how many of those I would see as I walked around as well. Besides the historical importance of fishing to Saint Pierre and the whole archipelago, you can also tell that there's a lot of recreational tourism that's involved with this area. There are many guided tours for hiking and bicycling. There are also car tours of locals that will take you around and show you the sights. Ferries to the other islands, Miquelon and Longlade. Longlade you can only access by a boat coming from a bigger boat, and there are no permanent hotels on the middle island. But unfortunately, I didn't have the time to try any of the guided tours. I was only going to be in Saint Pierre overnight. One thing to note about planning to go is that the ferries are not regular enough where you can just say that you'll take the next day's ferry on or off. The ferries run on a staggered schedule. So basically, when I was planning, I could either stay overnight or I would stay for 3 days before I would be able to come back. So for purposes of keeping the trip shorter, I just opted for the overnight stay. Maybe on a future trip, I would only want to go by plane and then stay longer on the island itself and be able to see more of the overland parts of Saint Pierre and the other islands. Flights to Saint Pierre can come in and out of Montreal, St. John's, and Halifax. I've seen other YouTubers who went to Saint Pierre arrive by air. When I was planning this trip initially, I thought it would be a much shorter drive somehow to Fortune to take the ferry over to Saint Pierre, so that's why I planned it as a road trip. And then as I realized the distances involved, all of a sudden my short little trip to and from Saint Pierre by car turned into a 12-day romp around Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. But in the end, it was very worth it. I'm glad I went, crossed that off my bucket list, also crossed off going to Newfoundland. So it was good for me to make the trip, and I'm glad I went. So once I was done with the walking tour, I headed back to the hotel. There I had a continental breakfast with the manager, Pascal, and one other guest, which was included as part of the hotel fee. So once that was over, I gathered up my suitcase and I walked the trip back down to the ferry to get ready to depart. So having arrived the night before about 9:30, my ferry back to Fortune was scheduled for about 1 o'clock, and they want you there at least an hour in advance. So I went down to the harbor area, walked around for a few minutes. They had some boats nice and close to the road that I was able to take some video of, and then I headed to the waiting area. Once it was time to board, everyone got on board the ferry. I sat on the same deck as I had the night before. Since this time heading back, we were going to be losing a half hour based on the change in the time zone. We arrived Newfoundland time 1 hour after departure. And so once I got my suitcase, then I went to the waiting shuttle van to take me back to the car, which I had paid for parking the day before, about $40 Canadian, and the parking lot was about 1 kilometer out of town. I did end up driving back into Fortune so I could get a good shot of the ferry terminal itself. There were other people still disembarking, including a bicycle tour group. And so once I felt I had Fortune covered, I headed back out of town. I made it back to the Marystown DC fast charger that I had charged up to 97% before. It was a fairly straightforward ride on the ferry back from Saint Pierre to Fortune. And then I rode up here to Marystown, knowing that it was a good stop for charging. The stop past that had a occupied DC fast charger, and I didn't want to take a chance to go all the way there only to find somebody already on the charger. So my goal here is to charge all the way up and try to make it to St. John's on one charge. So to do that, I'm going into the restaurant next door, PJ Billington's, which was a recommendation of the owners of the house that I stayed at. So I'm going to relax and have a meal, come out, and then hopefully make the rest of the way on one shot.